Hello! We're getting back to root weaving. 3 years ago, we made a few masterclasses on this topic. Recently, I've looked them through over again. They're quite relevant today. You can use them as a guide. But time is passing. I continue weaving. I look through masterclasses of other weavers, take their experience into consideration. I myself introduce some modifications. So I believe it's high time to supplement the old masterclasses with the new knowledge I've obtained. There's an interesting point. While shooting those old masterclasses 3 years ago, I was changing my attitude toward paper. In the very first masterclass, I insisted that tubes had to be made only from glossy paper. Then I started trying different types of paper and my opinion was changing. You can imagine how many changes took place during these 3 years. We've got to know plasticine tubes, tried many different recipes. I believe it's very important to continue learning and to apply the newly obtained knowledge to your work. That's why we've decided to shoot this masterclass and to draw your attention to some points. The topic is to be continued. Today we are talking of how to start weaving. Later we'll discuss other innovations in root weaving. The main innovation is the way I treat tubes before starting to weave. I'd like to share the recipe I personally use. However, as I've got convinced many times, there's no axiom of how it should be. I've tried Dufra and I really like it. Anyway, every weaver chooses her own favorite recipe based on materials at hand. It was my way and now I'll share my recipe. However, it's not an axiom, so I encourage you to try different recipes and find the one perfectly suitable for you. There are plenty of them available. So I've taken 3 tablespoons of white enamel, added 2 drops of brown colorant, 2 drops of yellow colorant and 1 drop of red colorant. Well, it's hard to measure the drop size, but they are rather large. I've added 5 or 6 tablespoons of varnish. I've stirred up the mixture thoroughly and added enough water to get a liter of solution. I was going to paint many tubes. So I've coated the tubes with this solution twice. I've noticed that 1 layer of painted solution is not sufficient. So lately I've been always painting the tube twice. After the tubes dried partially, I've coated them with a mixture of half varnish and half water. So I've coated the tubes with such a solution and let them dry. I didn't use a hair dryer, I just stirred them up regularly. After the tubes got dry enough, I've wrapped part of them with polyfilm. As for the rest of the tubes, I'm going to put them into the freezer. The ends of the tubes have to be dry. It is very important, especially for root weaving. So, the way I start weaving a round bottom. Make 3 4 coils, I've made 3. And continue continue weaving as we've done in the earlier masterclasses. The modifications will start a bit later. I fastened the tube tail with glue to prevent it from sliding out in the second row. I make 6 stitches. The inner hole is as thick as a felt pen. I've determined it by experiment. You have to fill the inner gap completely. Now I proceed to the second row. I'll make one more coil and then lengthen the tube. Lengthen the tube carefully. Well, let's lengthen this tail as well. Got it. Now in the second row I work like this. One coil, the next stitch through the loop, one coil through the loop. It is the way I did earlier, but it only concerns the first row. When I watched the joint masterclass in the community newspaper weaving at vk.com, I've taken into consideration the experience of other weavers. I'm so grateful to the masters who have treated every participant very attentively. Their experience has proven so valuable for everyone, including me. So, a coil, I've taken the recommendations into account, and currently I add new coils differently, not the way I used to. I find this new way more reasonable, and it makes the work look neater. So thanks again for your work. We are doing a big job developing the technique jointly. Anyway, in the very first row I add coils in my usual way. It's easier this way. As for the following row, I weave it without adding any new coils. Just lead a tube through every loop. Well, it's a bit tight so far in the beginning. I'll show you how to make further weaving smooth. Well, actually it's not too hard even now. Prepare a gap. Continue this way until the end of the row, Lead a tube under every loop, preparing a gap with the help of a stick. I reached the end of the row, making coil in every loop. As for further weaving, I don't like adding new coils in one row. I prefer uniform widening. So the essence is as follows. At first I lead a tube through one loop. Then I don't wrap the next loop. This is the innovation. Instead, I lead a tube underneath the tube of the base and then through the loop. I don't make additional coils one after another, but after next nearest coil. Take a look, please. Here I've added a new coil, then I wrap the next loop. Add a new coil again, but not by wrapping a working tube as I used to. Instead, I lead a working tube under the tube of the base, which looks neater. Here I am going to lead the tube through the loop next after adding. This way I add a new coil after every other loop. I mean, here I made an additional coil, then I haven't. Here are two coils in one interval, so I've made an additional coil. Here are two coils one after another. And continue this way, making additional coils after every other coil. This way the number of coils is getting greater more or less uniformly. Now we're going to see it. So I will in one more row, and this way I reduce the intervals between the coils. As for the next row, I can weave it without adding any new coils. Further, just follow how much bigger the intervals between the coils are becoming. If the intervals are getting too big and you like dense weaving, then add new coils. If you prefer loose weaving with large intervals between the coils, you can do without adding new coils for quite a while. We'll discuss it in the next masterclass. So far, let's sum up. The point of my innovation is the way I add new coils. I lead a tube under the previous row. Not just wrap the tube of the base like I do in the first row, but lead it underneath the previous row, which is a neater way to add new coils. I'd like to thank once again Yana Fedorovskaya, Anna Tatyuk for their groundwork, Elena Lamokhina for the idea. Thanks a lot to Yulia Sergeyeva for her inspiring works. Actually, everything I've seen in the community newspaper weaving at vk.com has inspired me for further improvement of my root weaving techniques. We're going to continue the series of masterclasses on recent innovations. In the next video we are going to discuss dense and loose root weaving. At least it's the way I call this technique.